Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to our special show, Cold War 2.0. Today is probably the 34th episode of our weekly show with our dear friend, Tarik Cyril Amar. Tarik, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm fine. How are you, Kevork?
I'm good. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning to today's stream, whether on YouTube or on Rumble, and answering to our moderator's question. Johan is asking, how's my voice today? I'm well. Like 2 days ago, I was really suffering, and then I went on Judge Napolitano's show. I felt like I'm like an old engine trying to to move. It's like my voice was barely coming from my throat. I was like, I need some rest on Thursday. I can't really do it. So thank you so much, guys, for your patience. I couldn't do on Thursday at all. Today we come to you with a package of new issues ongoing still on the international scene, especially in Ukraine. And also, Kaja Kallas, it seems like she's trying to create Ukraine 2.0, this time in Armenia. And our different Tarik has published an article on Substack. We're going to touch that, Kaja Kallas, ignorance and war. And finally, we will speak about Israel. Israel basically trying to increase the U.S. Aid to its military and other aspects of the Israeli state in the Middle East. And finally, Netanyahu basically says, I dare you guys and I challenge you to arrest me when I come to the United States. So let's unpack them all together. Tarik, if I want to start with you today, it would be really interesting to show this article published by The Telegraph. The Telegraph article is, if scandal doesn't finish Zelensky, a Ukraine peace deal will. So this article suggests that even if Zelensky survives the current corruption scandal that we have touched last week, a peace deal involving territorial concessions could politically destroy him. Tarik, from your perspective, is this because of Ukrainian public opinion or because his Western backers would need a scapegoat for a so-called bad peace?
In this case, I would answer both. Right. I usually don't like giving answers like that because they can be a little bit evasive. But in this case, I think it's genuinely both. Because yes, if and when, I think when Ukraine and the West will in effect lose the war, it won't be called that officially, but in effect measured by what they wanted, they will lose the war and Russia will win it. People can like this or dislike it, but that's where we are going realistically now. When that happens, the people who have used to back Zelensky in the West, let's not forget he has already lost a lot of backers, right? The most important ones, of course, in the US. The people who are still backing him now, even if they don't like him anymore, I think, quite often, these people will need a scapegoat. You're absolutely right. And Zelensky, in a way, has done them a great favor, hasn't he? Because of the corruption. He has made it very easy to make him a scapegoat because he really is to blame for a lot of things. What will happen is the injustice that Zelensky will suffer, to be very fair to him, and I don't like him at all, but to be fair to him, he will suffer an injustice. And that is that they will heap it all on him, right? Yeah. It's not that he hasn't done terrible things, that he hasn't made horrific decisions. He has damaged his country very badly. I think he and his circle and his wife, they have all displayed enormous cynicism towards ordinary Ukrainians. All these things they have done, and they're terrible enough. But what is going to happen to Zelensky once this is over and ends very badly for Ukraine and for the West, he will be blamed for everything.
Yes.
And that, of course, won't be quite true, because he could never have done all of this without massive Western support and also without massive and misguided and wrong and selfish Western input, right?
Yes.
I mean, many of the things that make Zelensky so bad are Zelensky obeying the West. Or if not obeying, let's be more careful. Zelensky playing with the West instead of emancipating himself and his country from Western influence, which he should have done a very long time ago. So that's going to happen to him from his current backers in the West. Yes, they will sacrifice him easily. That's how it works.
Yes.
The thing why I said both is when you also asked, is it Ukrainian public opinion? It definitely is. It definitely is. Look, the Telegraph article that has been published very recently is right about the fact that Zelensky's popularity is much lower than it used to be and declining. But what they don't mention is, and probably they don't even know it because they're victims of their own propaganda, they don't mention that this process has begun over a year ago, well over a year ago. I know because I was writing about it then, and I was looking at Ukrainian data, not some sort of Russian disinformation. I was reading official Ukrainian polling data. And now, obviously, you can look at these polling data and you can say the Zelensky regime is oppressive. There is a war on, which also makes people hesitant. That's natural. And so probably they don't reflect reality very well, the data. Yes. But even these data have for a long time shown that his popularity was going down substantially, even those. And if you think about all the factors going into this, for a long time, every reasonable observer could understand that the reality is probably even worse for him. So this is actually a long-term trend. One thing people shouldn't think, and that's an impression that sometimes is given in the West now, which is, oh, Zelensky was super popular. He was this great war leader everybody loved. And then the corruption scandal happened. No, Zelensky has been declining in the esteem of ordinary Ukrainians for a very long time already. And then on top of that, you have the current corruption scandals. It's actually several, and they won't stop. If you know a little bit about what has been going on in Ukrainian arms procurement, in the armament sector, and so on, every observer who's not naive tells you the same thing, that what we are seeing now is peanuts. As bad as it is, this is just for starters. This is going to get so much worse. And let me add one more thing before I stop talking for so long. There's one sentence in the Telegraph article I find ridiculous. It is, after all, the good old Telegraph, right? There has to be something that's completely detached from reality.
Churchill?
Yes, that anyhow. Although I'm not a Churchill fan, so I'm not so sensitive. I know the Telegraph, when they say Churchill, they mean like a mixture between Superman and a saint. But when I hear Churchill, I hear a mixture between sort of a demon and something else. Ask the Bangladeshis, ask the Indians, ask the striking workers. So I'm not that impressed by Churchill. Although, of course, there is a period in Churchill's life that is very special, and one could talk more about this. But let's set that aside. No, what I meant is something else. Namely, that somewhere in this article, the Telegraph is saying that Zelensky is how did they put that again? Let me think. I have to really try to paraphrase it as correctly as I can. What?
I'm also trying to bring the article again.
No, it's a very specific and very strange phrase if you think about it. They seem to be thinking that Zelensky is I can't even write. It's hard to describe really. Let's come back to it later. But the point is Zelensky's chances of it's actually quite simple. What they say in the Telegraph article is that Zelensky, that there's no reason to assume that Zelensky is involved in the current main scandal. I'm saying main scandal because it's a system of scandals. It's not just one. And the main scandal is what in Ukraine they call Mindich Gate. Mindich Gate, that's the Ukrainian. Or when they pronounce it in Ukrainian, they say Mindich hate, right? So anyhow, what they mean by that is a particular scheme involving the utility Energoatom. And hundreds of millions, or about 100 million. I think it's going to be more at the end. So what Telegraph is saying, there's no reason to think Zelensky is involved in this. And what you need to understand is everyone in Ukraine thinks the opposite. And rightly so. Everyone in Ukraine assumes that Zelensky is obviously deeply
Yes.
involved in it, and that the only difference between Zelensky and people who have now been officially affected, like his former chief of staff Yermak, or like that famous, infamous Mindich, who was a Zelensky intimus, a friend, a business partner. The only difference between them and Zelensky is that the evidence about Zelensky is being kept back. There are thousands of hours of wiretaps, and the wiretaps are only the tip of the iceberg. Because what a lot of people don't understand is these agencies don't just say, oh, we have a wiretap, we heard something here, and that's proof. What they mostly do is they take the wiretaps and then they unroll the processes behind it. So they start from the wiretap conversations and they go into the banking records, the legal records. They trace the stuff internationally. That's what they really do. And we are now at a situation where Zelensky's voice is extremely likely to be on these recordings as well. But they haven't yet released recordings with his voice.
Yes.
And I repeat, every Ukrainian who's not completely insane and every halfway normal international observer knows that we have a 99% probability that Zelensky is on the tapes, and in a very, not literally tapes, but on the wiretaps, in a very bad and in a very central way. So that's most likely also still coming.
I hope these tapes are just audio and not also video.
No.
we don't want to see what is he doing, especially with the white stuff.
I've heard only about audio. yeah.
But
not for children.
Also, yeah. But I think this article also hints at a Churchill moment.
Yes.
A war leader being discarded once peace is within reach. Do you see Zelensky's position as structurally similar to Churchill's in 1945? Or is this analogy misleading given Ukraine's basically dependence on foreign funding and weapons?
I think it's totally different in many ways. I'm not now talking about the different personalities, right? With all my skepticism about Churchill and the Churchill cult, right? I still think these are very different people, right? Different characters. The comparison never made sense. Yeah. But structurally, it's also very different. One reason is, look, Great Britain, towards the end of World War II, you could argue was extremely dependent on the US. They didn't like to admit it, but that was actually true, right? And then when the Cold War unfolds, like from sort of 45, 47, 48, this becomes ever more clear. And it reaches sort of a late high point at the Suez Crisis of 56, when the US really, you mediate the Brits and make it clear to them, you are a second-rate power now. You're not the British Empire anymore. All of this is going on. But there is this enormous difference that Britain is on the side of the winners.
Yes.
Right? Geopolitics 101. Core difference. Winning or losing. That's the world we live in. And this is entirely different. Ukraine, you know, people can find this regrettable, unfortunate, tragic, whatever they want, but it is a fact. I find it tragic because none of this should have happened, right?
Yes.
But it is a fact that Ukraine will not be on the side of the winners, but will be on the side of the losers when this ends, right? Yes. This is very different. So Churchill was somebody in this situation who the British electorate could turn away from, essentially sort of saying, which wasn't very nice, but he deserved everything he got. He had so many dark sides in his life. Yes. They basically said to him, look, you've been a great war leader. We acknowledge this. We needed you as a leader. We are winning now. It's basically done. And you know what? Now we want somebody who takes care of apartments, who takes care of a national health service. We don't want this hyper-conservative anymore. We accepted you, the super Tory, the super conservative, because you were the war leader. And that's, but this is the post-war period, and we need somebody else. And that's what they did, right? They really changed course towards labor politics. Zelensky will never be in a situation like this because they won't look at him and say, well, you won the war for us. They will look at him and say, you lost the war. And what's even worse, the longer this goes on, I'm telling you, there's a lot of Ukrainians thinking this now, but they can't say it. But the longer this goes on, the more Ukrainians will come out openly and say, not only you, Zelensky, lost the war, they will say, you, Zelensky, are to blame for its starting. They will not forgive the Russians that easily. The Russians attacked. And they will say, you, the Russians, you attacked us, you fought us, and in the end, it will be you won. And they'll be bitter about this. But they will also blame Zelensky. This will happen. They will say, Zelensky could have avoided this. He sold us out to the West. And about that, they will be right.
Yes. You know, Tarik, there is a pattern I have seen in the past few years from Western politicians. They always try to spoil one politician whom they need a lot, and they raise from his status so much that he doesn't deserve that, let's say, status, one of whom is Zelensky. They roll a red carpet, they play with your ego, they try to give you so much importance that you would feel that if you win this war, you will become the hero of the heroes, right? And this is also one of the factors in Zelensky, that they played this game with him. Had he emerged victorious from this, and that was almost a mission impossible, he would have become this hero of the world, right? They would have paraded him all around the world. So I also feel there is this psychological trap that they deliberately try to push some of the leaders in the world to walk through the trap so they can push him into certain direction. And I believe they're doing the same thing now with Jolani, basically in Syria. They give him so much importance, they roll all the red carpet until they get everything from him, they suck him dry, and then he will be pushed off the cliff like it's a scapegoat. And I think this is going to be unfortunate end also of Zelensky, that he believed so much and he played with the West, and the West didn't play him, as you mentioned at the beginning of this conversation. It seems one of the outlets which I'm not really surprised, not so happy about what's going on in Ukraine is the CNN. Putin sends Trump's messengers packing with eyes on a geopolitical win. This article frames Putin's cool reception to Trump's envoy as a sign that Moscow believes time is on its side. Tarik, in your reading, is Russia genuinely confident it can get a better deal later? Or is it simply unwilling to legitimize Trump's parallel diplomacy before the US election is settled?
The second question, I feel I can't answer at all. I don't know how they look at that. And I don't feel I see much evidence there either way. But the first one, I would say something about, which is, I do think that the Russian leadership believes that time is on their side. I do think that, as simple as that sounds. And I also think that that is factually correct. Again, I'm not evaluating. I'm not saying, yeah, that's great or that's bad. I'm just saying the way the war is developing and has been developing now for a long time, you could say really since 2023 at the latest, actually is in such a dynamic that it always slowly, sometimes a little faster, right now faster actually, but it is playing out for Russia, right? And we could go into why that's the case and how they resisted sanctions warfare or economic warfare by the West. We could go into the Trump factor. We could go into what is very important, and a lot of Europeans don't want to acknowledge its central importance, what is happening on the battlefield. Right, which they always overlook, like it's not really, the thing. It is the thing in war, right? So all of these things, if you think about them, you see a trend in favor of Russia, and the Russians see it too. They would be blind not to see it. Now, I also think, maybe unlike some people who are sort of blindly enthusiastic about Russia for some reason, right? I have great sympathy for Russia, apart from political system and all that. But I have great but skeptical sympathy for Russia. I respect Russia. I find Russia very, as a historian, extremely interesting, culturally rich, politically sophisticated. I don't believe in all the stupid stereotypes about Russia, but the people who now think that Russia has unlimited resources and that they can do whatever they want are wrong.
Yes.
And we see signs of tension. I'm using a very neutral word on purpose, but there is tension in the Russian economy. There is. And they're paying a price for conducting this war. And we've talked about this before, Kevork, and I think we both agree Russia is also paying a price in that this war is essentially tying down its political and military resources.
Yes.
And you can see other places in the world where Russia is really suffering geopolitical setbacks. And there is a connection because they're really heavily invested in Ukraine. That's their choice. They think they have good reasons to do that. I'm not evaluating that, but it's a fact that they can't do everything, and they feel that too. So from Russia's perspective, they're not going to talk to us about their weak spots. Why would they? Right? Of course not. It's a resource to hide your weak spots as good as you can in a conflict. Sure. We would do the same if we were competent. But in the West, we are not competent anymore, right? So they will not tell us that actually 2 years more of this isn't great for us either. They won't say that, but they may think that. They may think that. So I think it's complex. My guess is, and this is a guess, that the Russian leadership is not insane. They know that the time is working for them, but they also know that it's impossible that time can work for them forever. That doesn't make sense. And so they have incentives to end this. But they think that their position is strong enough to hold out until it ends 90% on their terms.
True.
With their victory, we would say in an old-fashioned word. That's where we are. Now, I disagree with the CNN piece in one respect, because I don't think that Putin or Moscow as a whole has shown Trump and his negotiators, in this case Witkoff and Kushner, a cold shoulder. I don't think that's true. I think what's happened is that they were talking for 5 hours, which has a signal effect in itself, and that they couldn't agree on everything, which was very likely to be the outcome. But when you actually listen to what Ushakov, one of the right hands of Putin, later said about the meeting, he didn't say it didn't work out. He basically said, look, there are a number of things we agree, there are a number of things we don't agree yet. And then somebody asked him, and this is never reported in the West, somebody asked him, look, would you say that we are now closer to a solution, that is some sort of peace, or that we are farther away from a solution? And Ushakov's answer, and Ushakov is a very hard-nosed man. He's not fluffy. And Ushakov's answer was, we are definitely not farther away. We are definitely not farther away. So that's a cautious way of saying we are okay. We are working on this. And probably there's even some progress. So this isn't a breakdown. This is, again, right? It is just an ongoing an ongoing diplomatic tug of war, as you would expect.
Indeed. I'm happy that you mentioned that Russia has put a lot of resources into this conflict, and they have withdrawn from other files. Sometimes they, let's say, partially, and in other places completely. It seems one of the places that the EU nowadays is investing a lot is Armenia. And Kaja Kallas was in Armenia. I want to play this video. It's important what she says here. She is expecting Armenia to join sanctions against Russia.
About these issues today. The world order is clearly changing, and that's why the strategic alignment of the common foreign and security policy for our partners is extremely important, with whom you really are. Right now, I mean, also Armenia's alignment is 37%. So yes, the sanctions that we have put on Russia, of course, they are difficult, but we also ask this from our partnership countries because we all want this war to end. I think the effect of this war on all of our economies is big. So that's why we have put the sanctions to end this war, and that's why we also ask our partners to align with them. And that's why we are providing also the possibilities to diversify the trade portfolios, so that you are not dependent on Russian economy, really. But this is the world what we see right now, and that's why we are all struggling. but we need to see this war end, and that's why we have the sanctions in place. And if everybody is really implementing the sanctions, there's no circumvention. The sooner we end this war, because one party runs out of means to finance it.
So let me just wrap up what she said. She's asking Armenia to join the sanctions against Russia. And what does one of our friends, Tikran Avakian, says, what do we get in return? Like, we don't get an alternative gas supply at the same Russian price. We will get it more expensive. Are we getting any security guarantees against Azerbaijan? No. Are we getting any actual EU membership? No. We're getting $15 million.
50 million.
15 million.
I mean, I'd be okay with one, but I'm a single person, right? For a country.
Oh my God. It's like, what is this? And this reminded me why I brought this issue, because you published a brilliant article, Kaja Kallas, Ignorance and War. Maybe we could walk us through this article and also tell us if Kaja Kallas's doctrine also applies on Armenia, like turning Armenia probably into Ukraine 2.0 in this case.
Yeah, look, Kaja Kallas is, I really don't want to be too, I mean
Please.
this actually, I don't want to be too hard on her. No, too hard actually. And, but, yes, I mean, and I'm not to blame for that, but listening to her, to me, it's genuinely painful, like genuinely painful, because what she considers her thinking is such a horrific example of, on one side, an extremely strong habit of being schematic. She's not attached in her mind to reality. She's attached to these very simple ideas in her head, which are also wrong about reality. And the other thing, she's actually very ideological. I mean, a lot of people may still not know this, but Kaja Kallas' father was a high-ranking communist official.
Yes.
A high-ranking communist official, right? And in the Soviet Union in its day, right? And yes, she would never understand this about herself, but she herself has an extremely ideological way of thinking. Yes. I give you one example. I just have to do this. Look, at the end of this clip, she says, if there were no circumvention of sanctions, then this and that would happen. Essentially, we would win, the Russians would lose. If nobody circumvented sanctions, then the Russians would lose and we would win.
Yes.
That, to me, that is extremely similar to a very orthodox, but also very primitive Soviet-style communist telling you that if everybody worked honestly and effectively, in spite of the fact that we don't give them any incentives at all, apart from slogans, then we would win.
Yes.
It's very similar, because in both cases, the if makes no sense. Every sanctions regime in the world is one thing above all, a standing invitation to circumvent it. That's what it is. There is no sanctions regime that isn't circumvented.
Yes.
And in the Russian case, circumvention has taken on enormous dimensions because, and some people explained this to people like Kallas, but they never understand, because the Russian economy is so weighty after all, and so after all integrated into other economic systems, networks in the world, that if the West sanctions it, it uses everything else to circumvent the Western sanctions. Why wouldn't it? Of course it does that. So a Kallas who comes to you and says, well, if there were no circumventions, then everything would be fine. To me, that's basically like someone who says to you, well, if I were a fish and I jumped into the water and can't swim, I'd be fine. Yes, but you aren't a fish, you will drown, right? If, a nonsensical if. That's one thing. She's an extremely ideological mind. But now back to your initial question, which is the article I wrote and this is a while ago, it happened like 2-3 weeks ago, because Kallas made a statement even longer about
10 days.
the Second World War, and in particular the role that China and the Soviet Union, at the core of which was Russia, played in the Second World War. And the statement was essentially that she couldn't understand why people claimed that they played important roles. I don't know what Kallas thinks happened in the Second World War. Maybe she thinks there was an Estonian Rambo who defeated the Nazis. Well, I have to explain to her, if there was an Estonian Rambo in the Second World War, he was likely fighting for the Nazis with collaborators. But also there wasn't an Estonian Rambo. The way that the Nazis were actually defeated in Europe was by the Red Army. I don't know how often I have to explain this. I'm a historian. It drives me nuts. 80% at least of German land forces were destroyed by the Soviet forces. 80%. And Germany was essentially a land power. Have you ever heard of the enormous bombing campaigns they sent over American cities? No, you haven't, because they couldn't build a long-range bomber campaign. Yes, they killed about 40,000 people in Britain alone from the air. That's very bad, and many Germans don't remember how bad that was. But the fact remains that strategically, Germany was a land power. It wasn't an air power, and it wasn't a sea power. It made efforts in both directions, but they didn't go very far. It was a land power. So if you take out 80% of the German land forces, you are taking out essentially 80% of the German power potential. And that's what the Soviets did. Now, people may like the Soviets. I don't like Stalinists. People may not like the Soviets, but that's a fact. It's a fact. Every normal historian, left, right, center, accepts this fact. Maybe Tim Snyder has forgotten by now, but he's not a normal historian. He lives in a world of his own. So this idea that Russia wasn't important to winning World War II is plainly absurd. It's like thinking that, the Earth is in the center of the universe, or maybe Estonia alone, and the sun circles around it. It's absurd. It's flat eartherism of history. Now, the other thing, the Chinese. A lot of people in Europe still don't want to accept this. But the Second World War for the Chinese lasted even longer than for Europeans, because it involved most of all Japan and Japanese aggression, different sort of fascism, not the same thing. You can also say it's a form of militarism. We can argue about the words, but it's a different thing. True. So in the Second World War, it's not just about Nazis. They're a big deal, but it's also about Japanese, I call it fascism. It's about Japan. And China wasn't in a position to defeat the Japanese, like the Soviets could actually defeat in the end, the Nazis, the Germans. But China did absorb enormous Japanese potential. That definitely did happen. And like the Soviet Union, China is one of the societies that suffered worst in the war. And this is not just true in absolute numbers, because these are two very big countries and were back then too. It's true when you calculate per capita. These are among the worst affected countries, with hecatombs of victims of this war, right? There are also other factors in play in China. There's also latent civil war and an actual civil war inside this war against the Japanese. All of this is true. But to pretend that China isn't a massive factor in its own way in winning the Second World War against the fascist global threat, that's just insane too. And everyone who doesn't want to believe this yet, they should read an excellent book by, I think he's an Indian English historian, I'm not quite sure, but his name is Rana Mitter. And his book is, and he wrote a book a long time ago, 10 years, 20 years ago, called The Forgotten Ally. And that really lays out in detail what China really did and suffered during the war. And he's not some sort of Chinese nationalist or something. He's just a very good historian. And he brings it back and explains it to people. Yes, China was a major ally in the anti-Hitler coalition, not only officially, but in fact, it was weighty, right? So Kallas has no idea of anything. And then she's challenged by actually a German member of the European Parliament, Fabio De Masi, who is now a co-leader of the BSW party in Germany. And he actually launches an official inquiry and asks her, what are you trying to say, essentially? And she comes back and she tries to sort of wiggle out concerning China and claims she never said what she said, which is bizarre. And concerning Russia, she doesn't even try. She doesn't care. Her Russia hate is so immense. She can't even try to take anything back. She is a fanatic in her own way. And here's the bigger question, of course, that all of this is going towards, which is, okay, there'll always be a Kallas. There'll always be colors. There will be more than one Kallas, male and female, in different countries. There will always be people like that. But why is a Kallas the de facto foreign minister of the European Union? This should never have happened. This is a catastrophe, not only because she's highly incompetent, that's true, she is highly incompetent, but because she's ideologically insane. She's ideologically insane.
And this is the new generation of people who were, let's say, indoctrinated even at schools and universities. This was one of my observations during my studies at different universities. I have come across a big influence from the scholars, the professors in the universities, trying also not only to educate the people, but also indoctrinate the students. Like I myself, I had to go through a campaign of pressure from my professors, pushing me towards the direction of I have to believe that liberal democracies would be functional, for example, in the Middle East. Like this was so insane for me that so much pressure to the extent that it turned into blackmail. And I'm not saying all the universities are the same, or all the professors. I myself was one of the people I faced that. But I believe there were so many students also, they were persuaded by these ideas. What I mean is, in the past few decades, there was also in academia an attempt to bring a new generation of leaders who are ideologues, basically, without them knowing that they're ideologues. And those are the ones always project against others by calling others ideologues, radicals, etc. But if you don't know anyone from this political class, none of them, you don't know who is Kaja Kallas, you don't know who is von der Leyen, you don't know who is Baerbock, and then you play videos of these three personalities, just for an example, and then play videos of Xi Jinping and Putin and other leaders, for example, none of these people are known. And ask people who are not indoctrinated, who do you believe are more ideologues when it comes to making foreign policy? It's quite clear that people like Kallas are the ideologues, and that is wrong. That is wrong in politics. It will bring misery upon the European people.
Yes, it will. It's interesting what you say to me. I shouldn't talk too much about this, but as you know, I'm a professor, right? I'm a historian.
That's why I'm saying, because you an exceptional professor, and people like, for example, people come to this show to learn from you, Tarik. That's why you are on our show.
But of course, I speak in a different register. I'm not just lying in one register, and I'm not contradicting myself in different spheres of my activities. But I do speak in a different register as sort of a public person than when I speak as a professor to students in a lecture hall or in a seminar room. I think that I have to do that. But obviously, the other thing I do is that I think you're right. I'm very skeptical toward academics in the social sciences and in the humanities. And as you know, I'm in the humanity and the social science. It's a mix. And I'm very, very skeptical about them not understanding that they cannot abuse their leverage, or if you want to call it power. And I think it does occur a lot, and maybe even not deliberately, but sometimes deliberately. I personally, look, I can tell you what I do, what I've learned to do is I'm actually very open about what I think. I don't hide it. And I never pretend that I'm in the middle. One of the things I teach my students is this idiotic conceit that the middle is somehow always right. It doesn't get dumber than that. Why would the middle be right? The middle is just a point, an imaginary point between two types of extreme idiocies. Why would it be right? Excuse me? This is so dumb. So the middle isn't right. In fact, there isn't a middle. And I'm not in the middle. I am a person with a political personality, right? And it's pretty pronounced. And that's from where I speak and even teach. And I tell them that. And I tell them where I'm coming from. That's the one thing I do. And the other thing I do is I never, and I really can say I've never done this a single time in my life. I never punish a student for entirely different politics than mine. Never. I have a habit of giving excellent grades to neolibs and you name it, right? When they, you have to do a little bit of work to deserve it, but I'm generally an easy grader. I'm far too nice. And so those are the two things I try to manage this, because I want students to know, A, I'm a normal human being, I have a political side, and B, you don't have to pay attention to that. That's your business. You have your political side, right? And unfortunately, I think, I'm not saying this is a perfect solution. I'm not setting myself up as an example that would be idiotic. But I do think that I do feel that quite a few academics don't even think about it a lot. And they just think of themselves as these wonderful, objective people, right? And that's all they need to do. So with what this does in the end is, I think you're right. I think it has an effect on a generation by now, maybe even more than one, if with different flavors politically, of people who are trained. And not only people who are trained to become academics themselves, that's a minority, but on people who sort of go out into the non-academic life, including into politics, and who become, in the worst case, narrow-minded. And there's one thing I would add, which is, being ideological, we all are to an extent. I'm not excluding myself, but I do claim for myself I can reflect on it. I can even make fun of my own ideology. I don't think Kallas can either. But being ideological is not so strange. But if people become fanatics, right, if they lose the ability to understand that others are very different and that can also be okay, right? You have to have a fundamental respect for that. It is particularly bad in people who deal with foreign policy. It's very bad with people who deal with, say, domestic policy, with people who deal with economic policy. That's all very bad. They can do a lot of damage. But in foreign policy, it's especially bad, because in foreign policy, one of the big tasks you have is to deal with the other, literally the other. The guy who comes to you from a totally different place, say the American, the Trumpist American, who comes to you, the sort of centrist European, and you need to deal with that. Instead of just rejecting him or her, right? You need to find a constructive dialogue with the Trumpist American. That's foreign policy. And you need to find a constructive dialogue with, if you want to call it that, the Putinist Russian. That's foreign policy. It's the art of moderation and of keeping dialogues open between people who are very different, and on top of it, have different real interests. And all we see in people like Kallas, or before her in Germany in Baerbock, or Sanna Marin, the genius from Finland, they have lost this completely. They look at foreign policy in particular as the place where you go on a crusade for your own beliefs. Foreign policy is exactly where you can't do that.
No, you need to have a really certain temperament to be in politics. I started to doubt myself as a future politician, as myself. I no longer have lots of patience.
Yeah. I know the feeling.
You know what I mean? I prefer to stay here on YouTube than go into politics. But one of our commentators say about you, Tarik, I'm continually astounded by Mr. Amar's precision, both in his train of thought and his use of a second language. Einfach ausgezeichnet. Yeah, we also do the same. My
undeserved, but very kind.
and that's why we have Tarik weekly on our show as a regular guest and co-host on Syriana analysis. We learn from him. So if you like to show support to Tarik, guys, last week I encouraged you to go and follow him on X. Now you hit the 17,000 followers. So I think we have now to go to 20,000. If you're watching this if you're watching this, you're an ex, you're active there, go and hit subscribe and follow.
Yes, do.
Tarik, guys.
Go to Elon.
Heavily shadow banned there, so show him some love, okay? That would be amazing. And as you're watching this, before we go to the last part of today's episode, guys, because we're going to speak about Netanyahu, Israel, and the United States, I just want to thank quickly PK Dam for becoming a YouTube member on Syriana Analysis, and also Piano Man for the super sticker. Thank you so much. And Karol Julund for also the generous support. I really appreciate it, guys. As you're watching this stream, we are over 550 people watching this between YouTube and Rumble now live. As you're watching this, I would really appreciate it as if you can simply hit the like button, thumbs up as you're watching this stream. That would really help this show navigate through the algorithms and go like have a bigger audience, basically. Tarik, the last part of today's show is about Israel. I think this is the favorite part of your of the show for you today. Israel is launching its campaign for a massive increase in U.S. aid. Will it succeed? So basically, Israel is pushing for a large, long-term U.S. aid package at the very moment when American public opinion is more polarized on Israel than at any time in decades, right? Tarik, do you think Washington's political class can still push this through on autopilot, or are we reaching the limits of the old bipartisan consensus when it comes to Israel?
My fear is that unfortunately, very unfortunately, Israel may succeed once again this time. I would add one thing, which is this thing that they're thinking about, which is essentially getting the United States into a long-term, like 2 decades is what they're talking about now, commitment to give even more support, even more money and other things to Israel every year than they're doing now, right? This plan, even if they realize it, even if they succeed in getting this commitment, this memorandum of understanding, as it's officially called in this case, it need not last. It need not last, right? It is something that, if it's achieved by the Israelis, will say, oh, we, the United States, commit ourselves for 20 years to do this and that.
Yes.
The United States is not reliable, right? That's the irony. The Israelis are completely unreliable, right? If there's any worse liar than Washington, it's Tel Aviv, right? In international politics. So they may get what they want now, but my glimmer of hope is that doesn't mean they get it for the whole time they think they're getting it. And they probably know this as well. And the reason why I think they're still going to succeed at this point is that Trump, I believe, I don't know this, I could be wrong, but I think that Trump is genuine about not wanting a third term. Now, a third term isn't allowed, we know that, but I have always considered the possibility that he would try to do it anyhow very seriously. He has that capacity. He has, if you wish, the criminal energy, right? But I think he won't try. And so if you think about it from that perspective, an administration under Trump is an administration that can settle things for the future and then basically say, you know, the good old quote from the French king, après moi, le déluge, right? After me, I don't care, essentially. No, it's not literally that. So then he would leave it to, who knows, maybe J.D. Vance, if J.D. Vance makes it. Or maybe there's going to be a new turn. Now, here's the thing that I think the Israelis can't actually undo. And that is a massive turn in popular opinion against them, even in the United States. I think they can't undo that. I know that they're running these publicity campaigns and they're investing even more money into manipulating us all, as they think is their right. But I think they will fail, because what they've done in Gaza, they've done so many other horrific things, but what they've done in Gaza, they have gone so far that they can't make up a lying anymore, even if they pump in the money. Now, if that is true, then they can get the memorandum of understanding, but it's not firm ground to stand on. Over the same period that memorandum of understanding is supposed to work, these big tectonic shifts in America are still going on, right? And I think they will not be in the favor of Israel. So this is why this is complicated to me. I think they'll succeed for now, but it may not be the victory it appears. I hope it won't be the victory it may appear to be.
Tarik, when you mentioned this French quote, you reminded me of something that my father used to tell me, but in Turkish. It's the same, almost the same. He used to say, "Önce ben, sonra ben, ondan sonra da ben, sonra." If there is something
I get the
left,
idea. Basically, I get it. Yeah.
If something left later, it's
Yeah.
for
you. Yeah.
As we speak about Israel, Tarik, this week I watched a clip for Netanyahu. And this sounded to me like he's challenging not only Mamdani, but also challenging Americans, basically. He was asked about the enforcement of the ICC warrant against him. And he says, "I will come to New York, wait and see."
Yes, because everyone wanted to do one of these interviews in person right here in New York.
By the way,
and I was
I didn't answer your question, Andrew. I'll come to New York. Okay.
And that was my question. Would you come to New York, given what the mayor has said about arresting you?
Yes, of course I will.
And you will test that? I mean, what is the thought about how that would work?
Well, why don't you wait and see? Yes, I'll come to New York. Okay.
Would you want to talk to him, by the way?
Well, you know, if he changes his mind and says that we have the right to exist, that'll be a good opening for a conversation.
And I think Mamdani never said that Israel doesn't have the right to
course
exist.
he
And he would never do that.
It's the usual thing. I mean, Netanyahu lies when he opens his mouth. He can't do 5 minutes. No, I mean, he can't. Literally, I would wager with you, he can't do 5 minutes without either an explicit or implicit lie. This was an implicit lie, where he sort of, just swerved a little bit and made us think that Mamdani, it's not just a state. He said, if he acknowledges our right, that we have a right to exist. So he's trying to imply that Mamdani is an anti-Semite of a very fierce kind who denies Jews the right to exist. That's what he's trying to do here. None of this is true. It's ridiculous. It's slanderous. It's a smear. Yes. But that's how they operate. That's how Netanyahu operates. That's how a lot of pro-Israel propagandists operate. The constant smearing of anyone who dares to stand up against their genocide, their war crimes, their crimes against humanity, their apartheid, their constant international aggression. Anyone who criticizes them is smeared as an anti-Semite. It's so old, it's so boring, and they're still doing it.
Yeah. And unfortunately for them, this is no longer working, and a lot of people do not really care about this accusation.
It's losing traction. I totally agree.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean at all that there are no anti-Semites. There are a lot of anti-Semites out there, but calling everyone an anti-Semite has become a really, as you said, it's a lazy, boring argument. And Mamdani is part of the U.S. establishment. He is.
Yes, and he's being in the process of becoming much more establishment than before, even, right? So he's being co-opted as we speak, and he is eager. He is eager. He wants to be co-opted, right? Yes. He's there. He's like,
wait and see, guys.
Take me, buy me.
Really, you will see how Mamdani already disappointed many people. It's under people, guys. I believe. Before the election, there was so much hype about him by people who played also identity politics. Unfortunately, they wanted to support Mamdani, and not for his politics, only because of his background. And this is the outcome, that they play you by putting people, as they call it in the United States, which for me, the skin of the color means nothing for me. It's about your politics. But because the Democrats are so good in the identity politics, in the skin color, they put people like him, like AOC, like Rashida Tlaib. I'm also critical of all of them in positions of power. But at the end of the day, those are controlled opposition. You see them good at some files, and then when they are needed in other files, you will see them flipping against the interests of the people.
Let me make the point I always make in this type when we reach this point, right? which is I don't want to be disrespectful of people who vote for Mamdani. Maybe when you vote twice for him, it's getting a little iffy. But people who vote for these people say once, I don't want to be disrespectful, because first of all, there's always a concrete decision to be made, right?
Yeah.
Also about who you don't want. And I can accept the idea that it's worth a try. Even if repeatedly it fails, it may still be worth a try, right, with a new figure. So I don't want to disrespect that, but in general, I very much share your analysis, and I very much share the skepticism. If somebody like Mamdani gets through to success, it's already a strong sign that they are controlled opposition. That's why they're allowed to succeed. Corbyn, who is not great. There are a lot of things about Corbyn in Britain that are still not good enough. But Corbyn is interesting because they made him fail. They crashed him, right? Yeah. When he tried to become prime minister, and they really went with everything they had, and they succeeded in crushing him. And to me, that's a sign that with all his mistakes, at least at that point, he wasn't controlled. He wasn't controlled. And that's exactly why he couldn't win.
Yeah. I mean, Tarik, one of the reasons why I wouldn't attack the people is also who is the alternative. This is what the establishment gives to the people. Like, who was the alternative? Kumo, and he looks so attractive compared to the alternative, right? I mean, every aspect of life. He's energetic. He's talking to the people. He's posting on social media. He's very interactive. And the same thing goes to Trump and the alternative, who was I even forgot her name, the former vice president of Syria, the United States. What was her name?
Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris. How dare you? How dare you forget her name?
You have Kamala Harris and Donald Trump.
And before Kamala Harris, you had Clinton. Clinton. I mean, sorry.
I mean, Clinton, she's capable, like that woman, she's capable of evil.
In a demonic way, yes.
Indeed. But
in a Kissinger way, yes.
Yeah. That's the point. Thank you so much, Tarik. I really appreciated your insights and your valuable analysis. Every week, guys, we do this on Friday, 5 p.m. Central European Time, 11 a.m. Eastern American Time. So all the thanks goes to Tarik and his brilliant participation on our channel, Syriana Analysis. And thank you so much, guys, for tuning in, whether on YouTube or on Rumble. If you like this show, the easy thing to do is hit the like button, subscribe to Syriana Analysis. And if you like to go one step further and support this independent work, you can become a patron. The link is scrolling on the screen, patreon.com/Syriana Analysis. If you're sitting on your couch and watching this on your TV, you can simply turn on your camera and scan this QR code on the screen, so it sends you to the support page. Peace be upon you guys and upon your families, and I will see you on Monday. Salam.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.